About time that we got this announcement. Like, damn, Dana, thank you. Finally, we get this announcement. And no surprises here. Ilia Topuria is fighting Charles Oliveira at UFC 317 in June 28th, following the Islam Vacated vacating the title, which actually was kind of like in discussion. Was he going to vacate? Was it going to be an interim belt for UFC 317 between Charles and Ilia? And of course, this was all following the events of 315. But in the end, the UFC's probably like, yeah, we don't want another interim mess like we have at heavyweight right now. So Islam, it's best if you vacate the title and move up. So that's what he's doing. Islam's going after Jack Della Maddalena at welterweight. And now Ilia Topuria and Charles Oliveira are fighting for an undisputed vacant lightweight title. And we're going to discuss not just this card, but of course the other few announcements that Dana added along to it. He made a nice little package tonight with a bunch of announcements like some Abu Dhabi fights, and then UFC 319 with Khazmat Chimaev and Dricus du Plessis, a big fight that we obviously knew was happening. We just didn't know when, but now we're getting it. So that's closing out the summer, and I'm going to break down this video into the three sections, starting, of course, with 317 because that's coming up quickly. So that's coming up most certainly very soon, and Topuria is going for the undisputed lightweight title now. He is continuing his climb into a level we could not have foreseen for him this quickly. Just absolutely trying to tear through all of the biggest legends of this sport. And yeah, he's going after Charles. And by the way, the more and more I think about the Jack Della Maddalena fight with him versus Belal Muhammad and the way that he defended versus the takedowns versus Belal Muhammad, because he did some specifics training and the way he lit him up on the feet. Just seeing Jack Della Maddalena as crisp as he was as a fighter and everything he did well in that fight, I could honestly say that I think that the Islam versus Jack Della Maddalena fight is a lot closer than what it could be. Of course, Islam is a whole level of a fighter, and he's a pound for pound number one. He could be so much scarier at welterweight, but Jack Della Maddalena, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, all right, this is gonna be a crazy fight. Also, very high level, but that's for a later date. So the UFC has that circled on their calendar for a later date that we just don't know yet. But for now, we're going to talk about this with Ilia Topuria and Charles Oliveira. And then what else? Some other fights as well with Pantoja versus Kai Kara France and Beneil Dariush versus Renato Moicano. Yeah, we're going to go through all these fights. But I mean, clearly the full card is not announced yet. So I do have some hope. And listen, I want to start off with the positives, because I really feel like in every video I keep on complaining about what the UFC could do better, what they're lacking in, that they can't fumble and this and that. And of course, this main event just does not deliver as much hype as an Islam versus Ilia announcement would have today. But still, and I just thought that maybe the rest of the card was going to be like incredibly stacked. And I don't know, I guess I just had a much higher expectations for this than what was actually announced. And again, maybe there could be one more fight added onto here that's really big. I thought maybe Baralio versus Nasruddin Imavov was going to be on here. And it's just this card is not as strong as I would have thought for UFC 317. I just had a lot higher expectations. It seems to be there's, again, a lot of Brazilians on this card, like UFC 313 with Pantoja, Moicano, Royval, Costa, Rodriguez. Yeah, like almost every one of these fights right now has a Brazilian in it. So very Brazilian-themed card again in Las Vegas. Let's just start with talking about UFC 317. Now we know. Now we have a vision. Oh, it's not opening. But we now have the vision in view that Ilia Topuria is going to be fighting Charles Oliveira. And Ilia Topuria, this would be still an incredible thing for him to accomplish in his career, to go from becoming featherweight champion versus Volkanovski. Volkanovski, one of the greatest featherweights ever, to come in there, knock him out, and get the featherweight belt. Then you go and defend it against the second best featherweight ever, Max Holloway. And not just beat him, but beat him in one of the craziest ways possible, being the first guy ever in Max Holloway's entire career to knock him down and knock him out. And then if he was to go up to lightweight and knock out Charles Oliveira, this guy cleaned off 3 straight legends. He improves to 17-0 and becomes the lightweight champion of the world. This would just be, again, furthering his legacy as one of the greatest fighters of all time. We really did miss out on one, I'll tell you. Like, we did miss out on one of the best generational fights we could have gotten between Ilia and Islam. One of the best pound-for-pound stylistic fights we could have gotten. Most high-level matchup. There's no denying that. Like, the way that this card would have felt with that fight at the top would have been levels higher. But still, it's a very high-level fight. And Charles Oliveira, the only path to victory here for Charles Oliveira is, of course, being the dangerous submission artist that he is taking Ilia to the ground and testing Ilia on Ilia's submission game and really bringing it to Ilia Topuria on the ground with the submissions. And because if Ilia Topuria keeps on the feet, there's no doubt in my mind he's going to smoke through Oliveira within maybe 2 rounds. 2 or 3. Ilia's too crisp on the feet. He's too sharp. He has too much power. We've seen Oliveira get pinpointed a couple times in his career on the feet. Even Michael Chandler had him phased a little bit in his last fight. Michael Chandler, you talking between Ilia Topuria and Michael Chandler, Topuria is levels beyond Michael Chandler. He's way more calculated. Topuria doesn't have any wasted movements. Topuria's movements always have intended purpose. They're extremely calculated, and Topuria is going to usually have success with his combinations in breaking you down. He'll maybe do some leg kicks, and Topuria always has that ground game to fall back on. That he has a strong jiu-jitsu base, and we're just not sure of it, how legitimate it is. But if people remember, he did submit Bryce Mitchell. He did what's the other guy? I don't know. He submitted one other guy. Ilia Topuria has shown off some submissions before in his career, but of course we all know the legendary power that he has to be able to knock out Max Holloway, Volk. He's just knocking bodies left and right. I feel like if he touches Charles with that power, it's over for Charles. So that's what I think. Topuria has a chance to really just elevate his star power, regardless if it was Islam or Charles. Of course, Islam would have been bigger, but to elevate his star power to a whole new level when you could say that you now are the lightweight champ after being the featherweight champ. Just, he's rapidly doing all these bucket list items in the UFC. He's going for legendary status by knocking off legends, moving different pieces on the, he's moving the pieces on the board. He's looking to go through all of our favorite fighters. And Charles Oliveira is next. So that's with Topuria versus Charles Oliveira. And then you go on to Pantoja versus Kai Kara-France, right? I think this is pretty straightforward. Pantoja is going to defend versus Kai Kara-France. Now, whether Kai Kara-France could last all the rounds, maybe, but Alexandre Pantoja, he's so good. His pressure, his ground game, Pantoja is just going to reign supreme on this flyweight division, really. And you even have Kai Kara-France and Manel Kape versus Brandon Royval under the card, under this co-main, so they could be, any of these guys could be a backup in case Kai Kara-France gets injured. But yeah, Pantoja is probably going to be heavily favored to win this fight. He's running laps in the flyweight division. I saw a thing the other day that he doesn't even want to jump to bantamweight to try and get double champ status against Merab in the distant future. He just says, what do I need to do this for? I've already, proven so much at flyweight. Why do that when I can be so dominant at flyweight? I just think that's a shame if he wouldn't want to jump up and just give us that fun fight, because him and Merab could be really just running laps for the next few years in their divisions. If somebody doesn't really step up and take the belt from Merab, if Sean O'Malley doesn't do it, I don't see any, maybe Umar in a second fight, but I don't see anybody else really claiming that belt off Merab. And Pantoja, I really don't know who's going to get the belt off him. It doesn't seem like Pantoja right now is in the conversation for being one of the greatest flyweights. It's him, Demetrius Johnson, and then maybe Davison Figueiredo. He might have already surpassed Davison Figueiredo. When it comes to flyweights, that's the conversation of the GOATs. Renato Moicano versus Beneil Dariush. This fight was supposed to happen at 311, and then Renato Moicano had to step up for Arman to take on Islam in the lightweight fight, which was a horrible main event because Islam just finished Renato. So not entirely Renato's fault, to be able to be prepared for the number one pound for pound champ of your division on a day notice. It's a tall task, but he was willing to step in there. He had the high energy. But Beneil Dariush gets this rebooked, so we'll see. I feel like Beneil Dariush will have the same energy as the last fight. If I win, okay, great. But if I lose, I'll probably retire. I was expecting Dariush versus Ruffy on here. And then Royval versus Kopp. Kopp looking to continue his momentum and his trajectory after 2 straight wins. Kopp is a pretty entertaining flyweight. He's taking on Brandon Royval, who's coming off injury after the first time they rebooked his fight. For Royval, his last win was Tatuto Taira. Manel Kopp beat Asu Almabayev in the last fight. Although I think that Manel Kopp got away with a couple eye pokes. That should have been time stopped, but he ended up chasing Asu Almabayev. And they finished the fight on TKO. Costa versus Roman Kopylov. So this is what I'm talking about. You got Costa versus Kopylov, Rodriguez versus Jack Hermanson. These are all good fights. But again, I expected a lot bigger name value on this card. A card like UFC 317. I really think my expectations were just set a little bit too high. Let me know if I'm bugging out for expecting more, or if my thoughts and expectations were reasonable, that we would get a much bigger card here for 317. I feel like if they add one more big fight, like Baralio versus Imavov, then this card would be already pretty sick. If you had Topuria Charles, Pantoja Kai France, and then Baralio versus Nasruddin Imavov, that's how I would improve this card. Maybe if they could throw in Ruffy again on here with someone else. I don't know. It was not exactly what I expected in terms of how much bigger it could have been. But Jack Hermanson versus Robocop, okay, another cool fight. Kopylov versus Paulo Costa, okay, whatever. And then Justin Tafa versus Juanita Diniz and Tracy Cortez versus Vivian Araujo. So, yeah, the fights are not as strong as I would have thought for a 317 card, but it all goes down with Topuria versus Charles Oliveira to end the night. Pantoja is probably going to I got Pantoja running through Kai Kara-France, and I got Topuria knocking out Charles Oliveira. Easy. Really easy, Topuria knocking out Charles. Then you go on to UFC Abu Dhabi. Why they got to do this to Whittaker, man? I mean, listen, the Ritter's looking kind of scary right now. The way he just finished Bo Nickel. I mean, Robert Whittaker is no Bo Nickel. But, I don't know, man. Ritter, the way he was using those elbows, the knees, and he looks so dangerous on the ground. I'm kind of scared he's going to kind of just maul through Robert Whittaker just like Khazmat Chimaev did. I'm like, oh, man, they announced this for Robert Whittaker. So this is the main event of Abu Dhabi. And Robert Whittaker coming off that loss from Khazmat Chimaev last October. He got Khazmat Chimaev literally in the first minute just completely ran through Robert Whittaker. Face cranked him on the chin. Whittaker's taken some proper time off, and he's finally coming back to take on a dangerous the Ritter, who's quickly showing he could be a real contender in this middleweight division. Just Ritter finishing everyone. Finished Holland in the first round. Finished Gilles Mearshart. Mearshart actually so far has given Ritter his toughest challenge yet, and that was his first fight in the UFC. The Ritter is quickly climbing. He is very quickly climbing. There's a lot of fun matchups for him at the top of this division. If you could put him up against Fluffy Hernandez, and then eventually if he fights Khazmat Chimaev or Dricus du Plessis, and him and du Plessis could have a goof off because they're both goofy fighters. And for Robert Whittaker, I really like Robert Whittaker a lot. He's definitely in my one of my favorite fighters. And so I don't like this for Robert Whittaker because the Ritter does look so dangerous right now everywhere, and I don't even know what path of victory Robert Whittaker has here. But Robert Whittaker normally is on the feet. His takedown defense, I'm not really sure what the stats are, but yeah, it just, I don't love this fight for Robert Whittaker because I think De Ridder could very well just run through him like Khazmat Chimaev did after what I saw from Khazmat Chimaev, because De Ridder could be looking to take it to the ground and then finish it. Another fight that was announced is Shara Bullet Magomedov versus Marc-Andre Barriault. That's a quick announcement for Marc-Andre. He just came off the win from 315. So he's taking on Shara Magomedov, who only fights on the Arab cards. The Middle Eastern cards, I should say. And you got Nikita Krylov on there versus Bogdan Guskov. Asu Almabayev versus Ramzan Temirov. That's pretty fun. Kazakhstan versus Uzbekistan. These guys look similar. And then Ibo Aslan versus Billy Elikana. So this card is shaping up nice because Abu Dhabi, they're going to go crazy for Abu Dhabi, even if it's a fight night, because the Sheikh is paying that serious money for him to have top talent in their area for the fight night. And then Khazmat Chimaev versus Dricus du Plessis. I got to remember to say Dricus, not Dricus. But I can't even click on it right now. But that's the only fight announced right now for UFC 319. So we actually have a definitive date now. That August 16th in Chicago. This fight is taking place to close out the summer pretty much. So the summer's looking really good if you're taking into account, looking at all these fights from June and on. You got to get through the drought right now for the next 2 weeks, which is these horrible Apex cards. Horrible. I'm not even probably going to watch, honestly. I might watch Burns Morales. This card, no interest, with Blanchfield and Barber. 316, ain't terrible. Buckley versus Usman, sick fight. Some more fights should be announced on that. Hill versus Roundtree. Then 317, Topuria versus Oliveira. 318, more fights will be announced on that. And then Whittaker, De Ridder. And then, you go into August with Khazmat Chimaev and du Plessis. Chimaev and du Plessis we could talk about on a later date, but it's going to be a crazy high-level fight as well with Dricus and du Plessis. I mean, will Chimaev do what he's done to all the other fighters, pretty much? The only guys that have taken him to war was Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman. So Dricus du Plessis, who's been training for sure on his takedown defense, on his resistance, and has a bigger build to be able to withstand and maybe not give Chimaev such an easy time at taking him down, that very well could be the case. And if he tires Chimaev out, then du Plessis stands more of a chance. But Chimaev is one of the most dangerous first-round fighters in the entire UFC. We have not seen a guy like this do what he's done in the first couple rounds, to just throw around people, finish Robert Whittaker like he's nothing. And he's one of the scariest fighters. And Khamzat Chimaev, it's safe to say he's already a superstar, considering who's already fought and how little he's fought, because he's had so many different health concerns and pullouts. This dude had one of the quickest hype builds in recent UFC history. Already from his second or third fight, this guy was being looked at and noticed. Even I knew who Khamzat Chimaev was back in whenever he started, because of his insane, not out of the ordinary character. I kill everybody. I destroy everybody. All that. I don't know if that impersonation is going to sound good, but so yeah, the lineup for summer is looking really good, honestly, and I'm not going to complain. I'm really happy with where the UFC is right now. That Bilal's no longer champion. Volk became champion again. Now we're going to have Ilia probably become champion at lightweight. And then Islam. We'll see how the welterweight mess sorts itself out, because welterweight's so crowded now. It is so crowded, but they're going to give Islam that immediate title shot. Otherwise, why would he have vacated? So we're going to see. Those are my thoughts and reactions on UFC 317. Let me know in the comments what you think about the card, and if you're happy with the card, or you think it's a little bit below the expectations that you would have expected. And yeah, can't wait to talk about this fight more in depth in the coming weeks, because we're less than 50 days away from the UFC 317 since they waited incredibly close, probably the closest they've ever waited it to announce a card. So I'll see you guys in the next one.